Bez Hashem Yisboch, we continue with the Hakdam and the Mishneh Torah in the mitzvahs, loisei negative prohibitions. We're up to mitzvahs, loisei rishmim hey, 245, in the middle of preventing things that are harmful to other people. And that is shalei ligzal, not to rob. Shnam like says impossible sigzal, not to rob. Rishmim Vav 246 shalei hasig gvules, not to change the boundaries between him and his neighbor. Shnam like says in the pasuk, leisasig gvul re'echa, don't encroach on the boundary of your friend. Rishmim Zayin 247 shalei lashik, not to steal money that was gotten permittedly from the owner. Shnam like says in the pasuk, leisashik re'echa, don't wrong your friend in the way that you really owe it to that person. Reish Mem Ches 248, not to deny the other person's money also that you have as deposit, not to deny that. Shlomo says in the pasuk, don't deny. Reish Mem Tes 249, not to swear regarding the denial of really what's really the friend's money and saying, oh, it's not. Shlomo says in the pasuk, not to lie. In other words, al sheker, don't swear falsely regarding your friend's money that you really have by you. Reish Nun 250, not to cheat someone else regarding business dealing. Shlomo says in the pasuk, a man should not cheat his friend. Reish Nun 251, not to harm him with words. Shlomo says in the pasuk, that he should not harm his friend. For your God, this is cheating him with words. This is hurtful words. Reish Nun Beis 252, not to harm the convert with words. Shlomo says in the pasuk, and that the convert should not be oppressed. Reish Nun Gimel, not to hurt the convert with business dealing. Shlomo says in the pasuk, don't oppress him. Reish Nun Dal 254, not to return a slave that ran away from its master to Eretz Yisrael, to return to his master out of Eretz Yisrael. Shlomo says the pasuk, don't close in on the servant to bring him back to his master. Reish Nun 255, not to oppress this slave. Shlomo says the pasuk, with you he should dwell in your midst, but what's good for him, don't afflict him. Reish Nun Vav 256, not to afflict the orphan and the widow. Shlomo says in the pasuk, any widow or orphan one should not oppress. Reish Nun Zayin 257, don't work a Jewish slave the way a regular slave is treated. Shlomo says in the pasuk, don't work him the work of a slave. Reish Nun Ches 258, not to sell them the way slaves are sold, out in the open, in a more in a public degrading fashion. It says in the pasuk, should not be sold the sale of a slave. Reish Nun Tes 259, don't work with a Jewish slave with oppressive work that you don't really need. Shlomo says the pasuk, don't subdue him with harsh labor. Reish Shamach 260, not to allow a Gentile to work with his Jewish slave that sold him with this harsh, unnecessary work. Shlomo says the puzzle, that he should not subdue him with this harsh, unnecessary work to your eyes as you see it. Reish Samach Aleph 261, not to sell the Jewish maidservant to someone else. Shlomo says in the puzzle, should not dominate to sell her, but when he is a traitor to her, where he doesn't go ahead and marry her, definitely not take her and sell it to someone else. Reish Samach Beis 262, not to hold back from the Jewish maidservant, which was designated for marriage, where he could go ahead and marry this girl that was sold to him, should not hold back from her food, clothing, and designated conjugal times of intimacy. Shlomo says in the pasuk, these three things, he should not diminish them. And the same thing applies to all women, that you have to give them these three things. Reish Shamach Gimel 263, not to sell the woman of the beautiful form, which refers to a non-Jewish woman that was taken captive in the war, where he wants to convert her to marry her. He's not allowed to sell her. Shlomo says in the pasuk, that he's not allowed to sell her for money. Reish Samach Dal 264, not to subdue this beautiful woman from the war as a shifcha, as a maidservant. Shlomo says in the pasuk, that he's not going to use her for other purposes. Reish Samach 265, not to lust after what other people have. Shlomo says in the pasuk, don't lust after your friend's wife. Reish Samach Vav 266 shloilas avis, which is the step before chimud, which is the person starting to think about and to endear himself to his, shouldn't desire what his friend has. Shlomo says in the pasuk, he says and don't desire your friend's house. Reish Samach Zayin 267 shlo yochel hasacher, the worker should not eat. If it's not at the time of when the process is finishing of what he's working on, from what's connected to the ground that he's working on, says although the work is allowed to eat from it, that's only by the gemar malacha. But when it's not finished, he's not allowed to eat from what he's working on, like it says, and the sickle he should not lift up to cut it to eat what he's working on. 268 that even when the work is allowed to eat, shouldn't take more than what he's eating. Shlomo says in the pasuk, that you could eat the grapes as your desire is to be satiated, but to your vessels you shouldn't put it. Don't put it in your pockets. Reish says 269. The person should not turn a blind eye away from the lost objects. Shlomo says in the pasuk, don't go ahead and and stay away from the lost object. You have to go ahead and return it. Rish Ayin 270. Not to leave an animal laying under its load that's crouched there on the ground on the road. Shlomo says in the pasuk, when you see the donkey of your enemy, etc., where that you have to help him out. Now, next Leisa says discussed regarding justice and regarding proper character and conduct. Rish Ayin Aleph 271. Not to create any perversion regarding weights, not to be deceptive regarding selling or buying. Shlomo says in the pasuk, don't do any perversion by mishpat, by midah, with judgment, with measurements, which lamdu, from tradition they learned that shakasam azah, what the pasuk is warning is leitasu oval b'mishpat hamida. It's not two different things. Don't do a perversion in the justice of the measurement, meaning to say that they have to be righteous in their measuring. Rishayin base 272. Shleilias etzleinu eif of eif. That there shouldn't be by us many different types of measurements of ephah, evan, different types of stone for weighing. Shlomo says impossible. Shouldn't be in your house these different types of measurements, which is a way of being deceptive in which one you're using. Rishayin Gimel 273 shlil aval mishpat, not to pervert judgment. Shlomo says in the pasuk Sasa aval mishpat, don't make perversion in the judgment. Rishayin Dal 274 shlil sheicha, not to take a bribe as a judge. Shlomo says in the pasuk sheicha leisikach, don't take bribery. Rishayin Hey 275 shlil chabed gadol badin, not to honor the greater one in the court case. Shlomo says in the pasuk said the pnei gadol, don't glorify the face of the greater one. Rishayin Vav 276 shleira dayin, that the judge should not be afraid badin me'od mera, in the court case from a bad person. Shlomo says don't be afraid of any man. Rishayin Zayin 277 shleirach malon badin, not to be compassionate on the pauper in the judgment. Shlomo says in the pasuk v'dol the pauper should not glorify him in his dispute. Rishayin Ches 278 shleirahatis mishpat od mchayte, not to tilt the judgment of a man who is a sinner. Shlomo says in the pasuk don't tilt. Don't turn the judgment of your enemy, which from tradition they learn. When we say the pauper, the destitute one, we don't mean destitute of financial, but of mitzvahs. Even so, you cannot tilt it because of the fact that he's a sinner. Rishayin Test 279 is not to be compassionate on the damaging party. In the judgment of that, he gets a penalty. Somebody says in the pasuk that your eye should not be compassionate. Reish pay 280, not to tilt the judgment of converts and of orphans. Shlomo says in puzzle, although you have to have compassion in general on them, but don't tilt their court case of the yasim. Either way. Reish pay Aleph 281. Now that hear the claims of one of the litigants where his counterpart is not with him. Shlomo says in puzzle, don't hear a false report. Reish Pei Beis 282. Not to tilt after the majority when it comes to capital punishment. If the ones who are finding him guilty are more than the ones who are finding him not guilty by one number, then don't go after the majority. Says don't go after the majority when it's for the bad. Reish Pei Gimel 283. That he should not learn to find guilt. Someone who had originally said not guilt, but in the first when it comes to capital punishment. Like says in the pasuk, they should not answer on dispute to tilt, meaning once he said not guilty, he's not allowed to turn it anymore to find guilt. Reish Pedal 284. 84, not to appoint by the judges, Adam, a person is not a sage in the laws of the Torah. Although he's a sage in other wisdoms. But don't recognize the face when it comes to judgment. He has to know the halachas of the Torah. 285, not to testify falsely. Don't respond regarding your friend as a false witness. 286, that a sinner should not testify. Don't place your hand with the wicked person. To be a corrupt witness. 287, a relative is not allowed to testify. That the father should not die on the sons. From tradition they learn that is, the father should not die based on the testimony of their sons. But the same thing is regarding all of the relatives. 288. Not to decide a judgment based on the testimony of one witness. That you can have one person as a witness stand up against the person. You need two witnesses. 289. Not to execute someone who's innocent. You're not let him murder. 290. Not to decide a court case based on estimation and evaluation until the two witnesses literally saw the actual thing itself. Someone is innocent, but tzaddik, someone is righteous. Don't kill. Can't go, oh, must have been. No, it has to actually have seen it. 291. That the witness should not rule bedin in a court case that he had himself testified, bedin the first when it comes to capital punishment. Where you cannot say Eid Nasadain, the witness cannot become the judge by capital punishment. When he says in Pasuk, that a single witness cannot answer regarding the life of the person, he cannot go ahead and become the judge. Reish Tzadik Beis 292. That you cannot execute someone who is liable for being executed before he stands in the court case. It says that the murderer should not be killed until he stands in front of the assembly. 293, not to have compassion on someone who is pursuing someone else. Rather, you kill that pursuer before he reaches the one that he's pursuing. That he'll then kill the one he's pursuing, or he's going to rape that woman. No, Shlomo says in the Pasuk says kappa, that you cut off her hand, meaning save the one that's being pursued, even if you have to cut off the hand of the one who's harming. Your eyes should not be compassionate on that pursuer. Reish Tadidav 294. Now, although there was a sin that was committed, but the one who was forced should not be punished. Like says the Pasuk, but the woman who was raped, although she was part of the sin, but to that girl you don't do anything because she was forced. Reish Tadidav 295. Not to take atonement money from the murderer. Like says the Pasuk, don't take this redemption money of the person's life for the life of the murderer that cannot redeem him. Reish Tzadik Vav 296. Needed to take atonement money, for instead of the exile of someone killed by mistake. Shlomo says impossibly. Don't take atonement from having him run away to his city of refuge. Reish Tzadik Zayin 297. Not to stand idly by someone else's blood being spilled. Shlomo says impossibly. Don't stand by while the blood of your friend is being spilled. Reish Tzadik has 298. Not to place a stumbling block. Shlomo says don't place blood in your house where you have something that person could get injured. Reish Tzadik has 299. Not to cause an innocent person to stumble on the road. Shlomo says if the evil is sitting in front of the blind, don't place a stumbling, which also has the metaphor of not to give advice that could cause someone else harm. Shin. Mitzvah number 300. Not to add on to the lashes for someone who's already liable for lashes. Like says, but don't add on because penyas, maybe you can add on, and then you're going to be liable for that. Shinal 301. Not to gossip. Don't go tale-bearing amongst your people, saying over something about someone else. Shin Beis 302. Not to hate someone in your heart. Don't hate your brother in your heart. Shin Gimel 303. Not to embarrass, to turn white the face of a Jewish person. You should surely rebuke your friend. Don't carry on him a sin. So either means to say that don't presume that he did something wrong and therefore you're hating him, rather rebuke him. Or it means when you rebuke him, don't embarrass him. Be that as it may, you're not allowed to embarrass him. Shindal 304 shlolinkum, not to take revenge. And like it says, seek him, not to take revenge. Shinhei 305 shlolinta, not to hold a grudge. Shlomo says, siter, not to hold a grudge. Shin Vav 306, Shlelikach Eim Alabanim. Don't take the mother bird together with the offspring. Shlomo says, don't take the mother that when it's together on the sons. The next leisa continues with the tumah of tzaras, Shin Zayin, 307, Shleligleach Sahar Nesek, not to cut off the hair around the nesek, which is on the hair of the head or the beard, which the hair falls out from the roots and it's bald spot. Don't cut off the hair around it, which is relevant for declaring if it's a neg of tzaras. Now Shlomo says that this nesek, don't go ahead and shave it off. Don't pull out the signs of tzaras, which there are certain types of things, like types of hairs. If you're going to pull it out, it's not going to have a tum tzaras. That's a prohibition. Like it says, be careful, which Hisham always says, say by the neg of the tzaras. The next place says continue with the laws of the public and regarding those of leadership positions. Not to work or to plant by the raging river, which is the area where they would do the decapitation of the calf, the egla rufa. When you find someone dead on the road and you don't know who killed them, so the closest city has to bring it. That area cannot be worked on anymore. That you're not allowed to work over there, and that area cannot be planted. Shin Yud 310. That a groom should not be obligated for any public needs, the whole first year of his marriage. For example, tzba, for the army, to protect the walls, or similar type of things. He should not go into the army, but he should not go out for any one of these things. 311, not to keep alive a sorcerer. A sorceress, one should not keep alive. Shouldn't you base 312? Not to rebel against the words of the court. You should not veer from anything that they tell you. Shouldn't you give 313? Not to add on to any of the commandments of the Torah. Whether regarding the written law, whether regarding its interpretation that was received orally. Shlomo says in pasuk is regarding all the things that I command you. That you should safeguard to do. Don't add on to that. Shin Yudal 314, not to diminish from any one of the mitzvah Torah. Like it says, and don't diminish from it. Shin Tezvav 315, not to curse the judge. Like it says, Elihim, which is a terminology for a judge, should not curse. Shin Yudvav 316, don't curse the nasi, which that is either Buhamelch, the king, or Yerish Shibas Eretz Yisrael, or the one in charge of the settlements of people in Eretz Yisrael, which was what's called the nasi of the Sanhedrin. Shin says, but nasi ba'amchal isar, that the leader of your people you should not curse. Shin Yudzayin 317, don't curse any one of the other Jewish people. Shin says, don't curse even a deaf mute. Shin Yichesh 318, don't curse a father and a mother. Shalom says, if he curses his father or his mother, he's going to surely die. Shin Tish 319, not to hit a father or mother. Shalom says, someone hits his father and mother, shall surely die. Now we continue on to the holidays. Shin Chaf 320, don't do any work on Shabbos. Shalom says, don't do any work. Shin Chavav 321, don't go out of the boundary of the country, of the state, like those who go on the roads. B'Shabbos, don't do that on Shabbos. A person should not leave from his place. Shin Chav Beis 322, don't give the capital punishment on Shabbos, which is you should not burn the fire in all your settlements, which that's one of the 4 types of capital punishment. You see now that to give that punishment because one cannot do that malacha on Shabbos. Shin Chav Gimel 323, don't do any constructive work on the first day of Pesach. Any work should not be done in them. Shin Chav Dal 324, don't do any work on the 7th day of Pesach. Like it says regarding it, no work should be done in them. Shin Chafei 325, don't do any forbidden work on the Yom Tov Shavuos. Like it says in the any work that should not be done on it. Shin Chavav 326, don't do any work on the first of the 7th month, which is Rosh Hashanah. Shalom says pasuk any work of constructive activity should not be done in it. Shin Chav 327, don't do any work on Yom Kippurim. Like it says with no work should be done. Shin Chav Chas 328, no work should be done on the first day of Sukkot. Like it says, Shin Chav Tes 329, no work should be done on the 8th day of Sukkot. Like it says in the Now we continue on with regarding prohibited acts of intimacy. Shin Lama 330, not to reveal the ervas, the nakedness, which is a euphemism for being intimate, with one's mother. Shlomo says in Bazi, Imchihi, she's your mother. Leisegal erbasa, don't be intimate with her. Shin lam man alf 331. Shlo legalis erbas eishasav, not to be intimate with one's father's wife, his stepmother. Like it says, erbas eishasav leisegal. The erva of his father's wife should not be revealed. Shin lam abeis 332. Shlo legalis erbas oches, not to be intimate with one's sister. Like it says in Pasuk, erbas achescha loisegala, don't reveal. Shin lam agim 333. Shlo legalis erbas achesai, not to be intimate with one's sister. Mina ab uminaim, whether it be from the father or from the mother. Like it says in Pasuk, erbas bas eshes avicha, that the intimacy of your father's wife, meledis avicha, who's born from your father, but it's from could be another mother. Acheschi, she's your sister. Leisegala basa, don't be intimate with her. Shin lamadal 334. Shulagalvas ervas basaben, not to be intimate with his son's daughter. Like it says, ervas bas bincha, the erva of your son's daughter. Shalom hey 335. Shulagalas ervas basabas, not to be intimate with his daughter's daughter. Like it says in Pasuk, ervas bitcha leisegala ervasan, or your daughter's daughter should not be intimate with her. Shalom above 336. Shulagalas ervas abas, not to be intimate with one's daughter. Now, but let me learn this special Torah. Why doesn't it say that explicitly in the Torah? Because you already tell me the daughter's daughter is forbidden. So Shasik Abbas, we didn't have to tell you regarding the daughter. From tradition they learn is that the prohibition regarding the daughter is from the primary halachas of the Torah, just like all other forbidden relationships. Shin Laman Zayin 337. Shlegalas erbas isha bita, not to be intimate with a woman and her daughter. Shlomo says erbas isha bita leisegali, not to be intimate with a woman and her daughter. Shalom Achesh 338. Shlegalas erbas isha bas bana, not to be intimate with a woman and her son's daughter. Shlomo says as bas bana, her son's daughter. Shalom Atesh 339. Shlegalas erbas isha uvas bita, not to be intimate with a woman and her daughter's daughter. Shlomo says as bas bita leisikach, that his step granddaughter is forbidden to him with his wife. Shin Mem 340. Shlogalas erbas achis av, not to be intimate with his father's sister. Like it says, erbas achis abicha leisegali, don't be intimate with his father's sister. Shin Mem Alv 341. Shlogalas erbas achis aim, not to be intimate with the mother's sister. Like it says, erbas achis imcha leisegali. Shin Mem Beis. Shlogalas erbas isha sachi av, not to be intimate with his father's brother's wife. Like it says, to his wife, don't come close. It's his aunt. Shimem Gimel 343. Shlogalas erbas eshes ben, not to intimate with the son's wife. Like it says, erbas kalascha leisegali, the erva of your daughter-in-law, don't be intimate. Shimem Dal Shlogalas erbas eshes ach, not to be intimate with his brother's wife. Like it says, erbas eshes leisegali, don't be intimate with the brother's wife. Shemem Hey, Shlogalas erbas achesisha, not to be intimate with his wife's sister. Don't take a woman with her sister. Shemem Vav, Shlogalas erbas nid, not to be intimate with a menstruating woman. Don't come close to a woman that's menstruating. Shemem Zayin, Shlogalas erbas eshes, not to be with a married woman. To the wife of your friend Leisitin, don't give shchavtecha, you're laying lazara for seed. Shimem Ches, Shlelishka Behema, not to lie carnally with an animal, bestiality, and then the animal you should not lay carnally to be defiled with it. Shimem Tes 349. That the woman should not bring an animal onto her. That a woman should not place herself in front of an animal to have it sodomize her. Shin Nun, Shlelishka Zachar, not to lay with a male to engage in homosexuality. And with the male you should not lay. Shinnun Alf 351. Not to be intimate with the father himself. It says Leisegalit, which refers to the father. Shinnun Beis 352. Not to be intimate with his father's brother, which is besides the fact that he's a male. Shinun Gimel 353. Not to come close to forbidden relationships with things that could bring to the actual intimate act itself. Could go in, for example, chibuk, hugging, benishuk, and kissing, or remiza, and winking, kvitza, and some type of body language. To all forbidden relationships, don't come close to become intimate. Which from tradition they learn, this is a prohibition to actually things of closeness which could bring to actual intimacy, that even those are biblical prohibition. Shinnun Dal 354. Shleisa Mamzer, that a Mamzer, someone who's born from a forbidden relationship, except from that which is born from a Nida, should not marry a Bas Yisrael Jewish woman. Shalom says, Buzli, of a Mamzer B'Kal Hashem, an illegitimate child is not allowed to marry someone amongst the assembly of the Jewish people. Shinnun Hey. There should not be a woman that's a Kadesha, which is that's a woman who is intimate with a man without the marital dowry document and with Kedushin, which is the betrothal, the engagement. Like says, but Kadesha shouldn't be a woman that's designated for forbidden relationships. Shinnun Vav. That the one who divorces should not marry the woman he divorced after she already married someone else. Like says that the first husband that sent her away cannot go to go and take her back. Shinnun Zayin 357. The woman who her husband died without any children, who's called the Yavama, should not get married to someone else except for her brother-in-law. Like says, Aish is amazed that the wife of the one who died without any children should not be to anyone else. Shinnun Chesh 358. The man who raped the victim is not allowed to divorce her. Shinnun says, he's not allowed to send her away all his days. Shinnun Tesh 359. A man who the morning after the wedding comes to court and says, "Oh, I don't know, this woman, I didn't find her virginity. She must have gone and acted illicitly with another man," which turns out he was lying. He's never allowed to divorce her. Shinnun says regarding him, he's not allowed to send her away all his days. Shin Samach 360. Shlikach Sagas, which is any man that has a problem having children, he's not allowed to marry Bas Yisrael, Jewish woman. Like says, a man with crushed testicles, which are one of the examples that he cannot have children, is not allowed to marry a Jewish woman. Shin Samachal 361. You're not allowed to castrate a male of any type of species. Not a man, not an animal, not a chay, not a wild animal, not a birch. Like says, in your land, you're not allowed to do such a thing. Now the final prohibitions are referring to that of the king. Shin Samach Beis 362. Shlelamanas al Yisrael, not to appoint on the Jewish people Ish Mikal Gerim, a man from the assembly of converts. Shlomo says, "Bazlei suchel losses lecha Ishnach." You now place on yourself a foreign man, meaning that's not from the origin from the Jewish people. Shin Samach Gimel 363. Shloyar b'melch Susim, the king should not increase the amount of horses that he has. Shlomo says, "Bazlei Yarbal Susim," he shouldn't increase for himself horses. Shin Samach Dal 364. Shloyar b'melch Noshim, that the king should not increase the amount of wives that he has. Shlomo says, "Bazlei Yarbal Noshim," he shouldn't have increased for himself women. And Shin Samach Hey 365. Shloyar b'li Kesef Azov, he should not increase the amount of gold and silver that he has. Shlomo says, "Bazlei Kesef Azov Yarbal Moed," the silver and gold he should not increase very much. Says the Rambam, Elohim Sheish Meis Ushleish Esrei Mitzvahs. These are the 613 commandments. Shenemaloi LaMoshe B'Sinai, which was said to Moshe B'Har Sinai. As we had mentioned, the Ramach 248 positive commandments, and we just finished Shasa, the 365 negative prohibitions, which Hein Ukululisein Ufrotasein. Them, their general categories, their specifics, V'Diktukein, and their details were all said to Moshe B'Sinai. Now, all those generals and specifics and details and explanations for every single one of these commandments, this is the Torah of the oral law, which the courts received from the previous courts going back to Moshe from Sinai. Now, there is also, besides these 613 biblical commandments, there's also rabbinic mitzvahs. Now, there are other commandments which were introduced after the giving of the Torah. For Kavos and Nevi'im and they were established by the prophets, by the sages, and they were disseminated amongst the entire Jewish people. For example, Mikra Megillah, written Megillah on Purim. V'nei Chanukah, the lighting of the menorah on Chanukah. B'tayim Tish B'Av, fasting on the 9th of Av. Yadayim, and washing one's hands. And Be'eruvin, and the law of gathering together different areas to be considered as one, to be able to go in that area on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Now, you have from every one of these mitzvahs, Perushin, B'diktukin, interpretations, and details. And they're all explained in this compilation of the Mishneh Torah of the Adach Hazaka. Now, all these mitzvahs which were introduced, we have to receive them, we have to safeguard them. Like says the don't remove yourself from anything which are told to you by the sages. And they're not adding on to the mitzvah of Torah. Now the question then is, then why did the Torah warn us, as we mentioned in the Loisa says that we mentioned just before, not to add on, not to diminish? That means that just means a prophet's not allowed to introduce something new. That Hashem commanded regarding this mitzvah, to add on to the number of mitzvahs in the Torah. Or to diminish one of these 630 commandments. That is not allowed to do. But if, let's say, the courts with a prophet they added on Shiyah Ba'is Zman that was there at that time, mitzvah, a commandment derech takana, through an ordinance, or derech hara, through some type of a lesson, like derech gezerah, or like a decree. It's not adding on to the mitzvah of the Torah. Sharei Amr, they didn't say Shakadosh Baruch Hu tziva lasses erev alikus and megillah by nasa. They didn't say that Hashem commanded this mitzvah of erev, of including certain areas for Shabbos or to read a Megillah in that time. Because had they said that, I'll tell you, they actually would be adding on to the time that would be prohibited. And rather, this is what we say. Shanavim and Bezdin tiknu b'tzivu. It's just that the prophets with the courts, they instituted and they commanded Likras and Megillah by Nasa to read the Megillah, the scroll, in its time on Purim, is to remember the praises of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the salvations that He made for us, that is close to our screams, to bless Him and to praise Him, to notify the coming generation that it's true that what was guaranteed to us in the Torah, because who's such a great nation that God is close to them, like Hashem our God, who's close to whoever calls out to Him, whenever we call out to Him. But in that way is the same understanding of every single mitzvah, which is from rabbinic law, bein aseh, bein lois, say whether it's a positive commandment or a negative prohibition.